Morning.
Morning.
A very special good morning to my colleague and teacher, Rabbi Carney, and to Polly. So we began this journey together many, many, many years ago in Camp Ramah, California.
Oh my God.
To share the Torah. I'm a congregational rabbi, which means if you close your eyes and doze off, I'll feel right at home. Don't make any special, stay away from me. I've slept through some of the best Torah in the world, so. We are in the middle of Bamidbar, so I want to give you some context, okay? When I was a young person and beginning my Jewish life, my parents sent me to Hebrew school. Went to public school in the morning, went to Hebrew school in the afternoon. But I was that very strange child who loved Hebrew school. For a very simple reason. I have 3 younger brothers, and Hebrew school was the only chance I had to talk to Jewish women, right? And talk I did. Whoever she sat me next to, I chatted up gloriously. They're still friends of mine, these people. And the poor teachers, in those days in the 60s, we had Israeli refugees as our teachers. They were all counterterrorism experts in Tzal, and but they couldn't handle American kids. So the teacher would look at me and she'd say, Yitzchak, Sheket. Yitzchak is my Hebrew name. Sheket means somewhere between please be quiet and shut up, depending on the inflection. And then I would continue to talk because nothing's going to stop me from chatting up this lovely young woman sitting next to me. And I'd get a second, Yitzchak, Sheket. And I'd say, Kain Mara, Kain, Beseder, Kain. And I'd continue. And the third time she gave up, she'd say, Yitzchak, La Sifriya, go to the library, which was not so bad because the synagogue had a terrific library. And I would much prefer to read my way through that library than sit in this class together. So she'd send me to the library. And that's where I'd sit. And that's where I developed a love of Jewish books. And the wonderful thing about the library was that the Hebrew school went till 6:30. At 6 o'clock, the guys of the Minyan showed up. These were old European refugee guys who spoke languages no one speaks anymore. But they would come in and they introduced this 8-year-old to the benefits of cigars, schnapps, and dirty jokes with Yiddish punchlines, right? So it was a wonderful Jewish education. Except halfway through 3rd grade, I get my first Yitzchak Sheket. I get my second Yitzchak Sheket. And the third time, she says La Sifriya, and I'm picking up my books and walking out like I do every evening. And she stops me at the door. The word rega, which means hang on. Uh-oh. Kain Mora? She says, do something in the library. I said, okay, what would you like me to do? She says, write a book report. I say, okay, I can write a book report. I know how to write book reports. I do this all the time. She said, good. Any particular book, or can I just choose one? And she gets this conspiratorial glint in her eye, and she says, the Bible. Write a book report about the Bible. So I stop her. Can you write a book report about the Bible? She says, it's a book, right? I said, yeah. Then write a book report. Have it done by 6:30 or you don't go home. Okay, all right. So you go to the library. I cheated. I got to tell you, I chose just the Torah. I took one off the shelf.
You didn't take Cliff Notes?
No, better. I got a piece of that. Remember 3rd grade paper with the thick lines and a number 3 pencil? So at the top, you put your name, Yitzchak Sheket, In book, the Torah, author, unknown, publisher, Jewish Publications Society, right? 1909, right? Setting of the book, somewhere in the Middle East. Main character of the book. Well, obviously, the main character of the book is somebody called God, right? Plot of the book. That's interesting when you think about it, right? Climax of the plot, resolution, and the all-important, would you recommend this book to your friend? Now, it occurred to me later as I grew up that I've spent most of my adult life trying to write that book report, trying to figure out what is the narrative arc of the Bible. For that matter, what is the narrative arc of the whole tradition? We typically read a Torah portion, one parsha. This week is Shlach,
or we read one perek, one chapter, or one verse, or we take one character. But I think there's something worthwhile in stopping at certain points along the way to look at the whole, landscape of a tradition, to look at the whole landscape of the Bible. What is the plot of the Bible? What is it about? How do these books work? What is it trying to say? Who are its characters? What is its climax? And where are we in the story? That kind of global perspective is so rare in the Jewish world. And I think it's so necessary in the Jewish world because, first of all, it was something that our kids have been asking us now for a generation, right? I was raised in a world, I'm sure many of you raised in the same world, where we never asked the question, why be Jewish? It was never a question for us. The question was, how to be Jewish, right? That's why in the 4 questions of the Haggadah, right? The kid who asks, how do I do the Seder? He's the Chacham. The kid who asks, why are we doing this? Is castigated as the Rasha, as the bad guy. But I think why we do this is exactly the question that 3rd, 4th, 5th generation American Jews are asking. And now I would say even more so, because I think October 7th has created a crisis circumstance in which the answer to that question is even more acute. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later today. So I think it's important to step back for a moment and look at these things globally. Let's take a look at Torah globally for just a moment. I will get to the Parsha before 10 o'clock, maybe. We'll see. Before 10 o'clock Pacific time. So let's come from California, so I'm still asleep. The books of the Bible get their names, the books of the Torah particularly get their names, as you all know, in the most arbitrary way. The rabbis simply chose the first interesting word in each book and called it that, right? So the first word in Breshit is Breshit, right? In the beginning. And so the book is called Breshit. I mean, by the way, if you think about this, it would have been great if Melville had called his book Ishmael, right? Or if Dickens had called it The Best of Times, right? Or something like that. But this is how this works. So Breshit is the first word. Shmot, the second book of the Torah, is Ve'elu Shmot B'nai Yisrael. These are the names of the family of Jacob that went down into Egypt. Vayikra, God called. What's interesting is that it's just an arbitrary choice. There's no sense in which the name is supposed to be attached to the content of the book. But ironically, it works that way. Quite ironically, although there's nothing ironic in the Bible, it works that way. Breshit, in the beginning, in English, it's Genesis, which is a little bit closer to the name. Breshit is the book of beginnings. It's about the beginning of life. It's about the beginning of the world, the beginning of life, the beginning of humanity, the beginning of the Jewish people. And more than that is about basic foundations. This is Yisodei Torah, as Maimonides called it. This is the foundations of Jewish faith. The second book, Shmot, in English we call it Exodus, right? Not the Leon Uris Exodus with Paul Newman and Eva Marie Saint, right? But rather this Exodus, that he wrote it right after Paul Newman wrote it. And this Exodus, Shmot, means names. And that's what the book is about. It is a book of identity. It is a book which is attached to the 2 principal events which give our people identity through history, the Exodus from Egypt and the revelation of Torah at Mount Sinai. The third book is called Vayikra, God called. In English, we call it Leviticus, which I always thought was the sequel to Spartacus, right? But Leviticus, by the way, comes from the word Levi, and it's because in Hebrew, the rabbis call this book Torah Kohanim. It's the Torah of the Kohanim. It's the guidebook for the Kohanim. But in English, we call this Leviticus. In Hebrew, it's Vayikra, he called, and that's what the book is about. God calls, and we respond. God demands that we create a sacred community. And then we have the instructions about how to go about doing that. The book we're reading today is fascinating. It's called Bamidbar because the first line says, this is what happened Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai. But that's exactly what the book is about. It takes place in the wilderness of Sinai. In English, by the way, it's called Numbers because it starts with a census of the people. But in Hebrew, it's Bamidbar because this is the book of our journey, the second half of our journey. And in case you didn't see that it's the second half, the book says this happened on the 2nd year and the 2nd month of the 2nd day. Part 2, son of Exodus, right? And now what happens? This is the journey from Mount Sinai, where we've been for 2 years, to the promised land. But in order to get from Mount Sinai to the promised land, you've got to go through a midbar. In the Torah, it's the midbar of Sinai. It's the forbidding wilderness of the Sinai. But the Torah goes deeper than that. This is a book about the human wilderness, the social wilderness. This is a book that is a guided tour through the darkest parts of the human soul. We are going to meet everything that destroys human life, destroys human souls, destroys human dreams. We're going to meet fear, envy, resistance, anger, pain, disintegration. This is a book about social disintegration. It is the noisiest book of the Bible, because in this book, nobody talks, everybody shouts. This is a book of screaming and yelling. This is a book which portrays a people with no common language. Moses talks, nobody listens to him. Everyone is screaming at everybody else. This is a book with no common direction. They're all going in separate directions. This is a book where there is no common ideal. This is a book where there is no common dreams. For that way, by the way, it's a terrific book for midsummer, right? I don't know, you have freeways here, right? I think we were on one yesterday. You don't have freeways like we have freeways. When God was designing hell, he decided the San Diego freeway was a good beginning, right? Where I live. You know, you get on a freeway, it's 108 degrees, your air conditioning doesn't work well, you're late for an appointment, and you're going 2 miles an hour in the summer in Los Angeles. The only saving grace is that I drive a 17-year-old Toyota and the guy ahead of me is driving a Lamborghini and he's going 2 miles an hour and I'm going 2 miles an hour. So there. But it's a book. I mean, when I don't know how many of you listen to CNN, God forbid, or read the New York Times. That's what this book is about. It's about a book of everything falling apart. And it all lands on Moses. It all lands on Moses, right? It all lands on Moses. First, his family betrays him. Miriam and Aaron are going to speak against their sister-in-law. And then the people are going to betray him. That's this week's story. And then his own tribe is going to betray him. That's next week's story. And then 2 weeks from now, I'm going to give away the ending. I apologize. God's going to betray him. Remember what happens? Miriam dies, and she's the only significant person who supports him. And he's sitting shiva for his sister, and there's no water. And the people are fetching that there's no water. And so God says, go to the rock and talk to the rock. Now, 2 years ago, he was told, go to the rock and hit the rock. Same story happened 2 years ago. Go to the rock and hit the rock. And he is so distraught and so unsettled. He runs to the rock and he says some terrible things to the people. And then he whacks the rock. Of course, he didn't talk to the rock, because in the book of Bamidbar, words don't work. That's one of the ironies of the book. The word midbar has within it the word davar, which means book. Midaber means to speak, has the word for word. The word for word is midaber. Midbar means there's no words. And in the book of Bamidbar, there are no words. Nobody can talk to anybody. So he hits the rock. And God says, you're out of the game. Go sit down on a bench. We're taking you out of the game. And Moses said, what do you mean? What? He's not allowed to go into the land. I read this, you cry. Don't you cry when you read this? The poor guy. He had a perfectly wonderful life in Midian. He was the shepherd of Midian. His father-in-law was the chieftain of the tribe. He had a perfectly good life, right? God comes to him and says, I want you to free my people. Moses says, nah, I'll make a contribution. I'll write you a check. God says, no, you're going to go. I want to go. I like sheep. Sheep do what you tell them to do. Jews, not so much. Moses had to give that up to schlep this people across the desert. He schleps them across the desert, gives up his whole life for this people. And now God says, you're not going to see the promised land. What? Like what? Like for what? I always imagine there's a different ending. Every year I come to this and I say, it's got to be a different ending. So here's what's going to happen. God's going to say, you can't lead them, but you don't need to lead them. You're going to go be one of those old guys on the boardwalk in Netanya. Anyone ever been in Netanya? Netanya is a beautiful little town just north of Tel Aviv. And the boardwalk is popular with these old guys. And they're all Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah. They're all there. And then Moses, they play chess on the boardwalk of Netanya. And they'll enjoy Israel. You know, come on. Nope, you don't get to go. The dream is spoiled. I mean, there's this sense of, at the end of the book, we get to the promised land by the end of the book. I'll give away the end. Sorry. And by the way, scholars tell us that once upon a time, this was not a 5-book Torah, it was a 4-book Torah, because we get to the promised land by the end of the book. We're going to get there. Except how do we get there? We get there exhausted. You see a people depleted. See a people burned out from the journey. And that's the way the book ends. And then you turn the page. And the most remarkable thing happens on the next page. The last book of the Torah, 5th book, is called Deuteronomy. It's very hard to spell, right? But in English, in Hebrew, it's Devarim. Ve'ela hadvarim asher diber Moshe al kol bnei Israel. These are the words that Moses spoke. First of all, that's ironic. Why is that ironic? Because when God confronted Moses at the burning bush, what did Moses say to God? Lo ish devarim anochi. I am not a man of words. I have nothing to say. The speech impediment is not real. What he's trying to say is, I don't have anything to say. I'm not a public man. I like my sheep. Right? And now, 40 years later, ve'ela hadvarim. Not only has something to say, it takes him 2 years to say it. He has 2 years worth of material to share with these people. Ve'ela hadvarim. Moses speaks and the people listen. Moses teaches, the people learn. Moses inspires, the people are elevated. Moses leads, the people follow. The book of Dvarim is the contrary to the book of Bamidbar. The book of Dvarim is about common words, common language, common direction, common purpose, solidarity. That's what the book of Dvarim is about. And so the Torah's promise is this: if you can get through the Midbar, you can make it to Dvarim. If you can get through the social wilderness that stands between the dream of Mount Sinai and the reality of the promised land, I promise you, you will find your way forward. That's the great promise of the Torah. That's what makes the Torah an ultimate book of Torah. If you can get through the Midbar, you can get to Dvarim. And there are times in our history when we are in Midbar times, and God knows this is one of them. I mean, you see the chaos in Israel, both on its borders and within its government. You see the chaos in America. I hope you didn't watch that travesty the other night, right? You see the chaos in our communities, right? But the Torah says, if you can get through this Midbar wisely, you can get to Dvarim, to a place of human solidarity and human community. That's the promise. That's what makes this book so wonderfully hopeful. Right? And the reason I told you that is because now we're going to jump back into the Midbar. Now, let me ask you a silly question. Remember the days when you took pictures and had prints, pictures? Now you have them all in your camera. But in those days, we used to go to Photomat. Remember 1 hour photos, and used to put them in photo albums. And you had to choose. You had 100 pictures. You had room for 10 of them. So we would always choose the good ones, right? The ones where the kids are sticking their tongues out or cross-eyed or making rabbit ears. We threw those away, and we kept the good ones. That's how you make a photo album. So if this is our family photo album, why the heck do we preserve pictures that are so ugly? Why preserve? Let me show you one. You have a minute? You going anywhere? Come back with me. Come to chapter 11. Come to chapter, it's on page 827. There's an old joke, by the way, of a guy who comes to his rabbi. You know this joke? Rabbi comes over and says, I have such trouble. I have such problems. My business is failing. My creditors are on my back. I don't know what to do. Please, please, Rabbi, help me. Show me some divine wisdom. Show me what to do. Rabbi says, all truth is in the Torah. Open the Torah, you'll find the answer. A week later, the guy comes back to shul, there's a smile on his face. There's a spring in his step. He said, what happened? He said, Rabbi, you were exactly right. The Torah had all the answers. He says, what did happen? He says, I opened the Torah and you know what it said? Chapter 11. Bad joke. Time. This is the beginning of the journey. This is the beginning of the journey. We have been at Mount Sinai for 2 years and 2 months. And now we're beginning the journey. This is a people who met God. You understand what that means? They stood at Mount Sinai and God came down the mountain. Just keep that in mind, right? This is a people who were slaves. Their children were being thrown into the Nile. The elders are being crushed under Pharaoh's projects. This people who saw the 10 plagues. Like no dipping wine out of your cup, like the frogs were coming down. They saw it all. And now Moshe says, all right, you ready to go to promised land? He said, let's go. They go, how many days? 3 days. The half-life of a miracle is 3 days. After 3 days, it all wears out. Just keep that in mind, by the way. 3 days. And the people, look at chapter 11, the people took to complaining bitterly before the Lord. I want you to know that the Jewish national sport is kvetching. And it always has been. Like, this people has nothing to kvetch about. They were rescued from Pharaoh, brought to Mount Sinai, introduced to the Lord, given instructions on how to build a holy community, fed manna in the desert, nothing wore out. They're being led by Moshe Rabbeinu, by God. I mean, you know, and yet they have what to complain about? Look at the next paragraph. The riffraff, the word in Hebrew is asafsuf. So riffraff, asafsuf, is a wonderful onomatopoeic. Like, there's this element in this people, right? I don't know if anyone ever been a synagogue officer, but you know what that word means, right? That's the person who always catches you on the most beautiful Shabbos of the year and says, the Kiddush was just not up to my expectations. In my shul, we have a table of street people who come every Shabbos. We serve a nice lunch. You ever come to LA, you come eat bites. And there's a table of street people, homeless people who come into the shul. We let them in. They come at the end of shul, they sing a Don Olam, and they go make lunch, right? One of the guys comes up to me. This is a true story. One of the guys comes up to me and he says, I don't like this meal. It's really not up to your standards. I want to talk to somebody. Street person who came off the street for a free meal and he's unhappy. It turns out the president of the shul is a mensch. Actually, he's from here. The Norm Levine. He grew up in Cleveland. His sister belongs here. And Norm, and I said to Norm, Norm, please meet Herb. Herb would like to tell you something. Norm Levine is the managing partner of the biggest law firm in LA, right? And he's the president of my shul. And they sat together for half an hour. The guy was like, the riffraff, I don't like the Kiddush, right? A free meal, but I don't like it. I want better. Same thing. Right? The riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving. What's the Hebrew? Hitavu ta'ava. Ta'ava means desire, appetite, need. Right? And the Israelites wept, and they said what? If only we had meat to eat. We remember fleischiks. We're tired of milchiks. We want fleischiks. We remember the fish we used to eat. And here's the most important word in the sentence. The fish we used to eat, what? Say it again. You didn't have to pay for it. No check. Right in Egypt. You remember Egypt? Everybody remember Egypt? You remember Egypt? How wonderful it was with the midnight buffet, with the chocolate fountain. You put the marshmallows in the chocolate fountain. You remember Egypt? You remember Egypt with the open bar? You remember Egypt? What a wonderful place on the cruise ship. Remember Egypt? Turn the page. Right, with the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. Oh, remain you. Anybody know those Yiddish songs, right? Right. My cantor is a Yiddish actor, so he sings, remain you. My shtetl bells, where everyone died of tuberculosis before the age of 5, I mean, come on. I remember the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks. Right now, our gullets are shriveled. There's nothing at all, nothing but manna. And then the Torah stops and says, manna was actually pretty good, says manna, and you didn't have to work for it. This is the ugliest picture of human beings you could possibly have drawn. These are people that were slaves just yesterday. They're free. These are people that just met God. Moses gave them freedom. Moses gave them truth. Moses gave them a vision of who they could be in the world. And what do they want? Hamburgers, steaks, chops, chili. What's wrong with you people? This is, and I wouldn't have put this in a Torah. My Torah would have been a lot nicer. I wouldn't. This is, if you didn't know that we wrote it, you'd say, "Oh, anti-Semitic," right? Look, what do Jews care about? Not money, food. That's what the anti-Semites don't know, by the way. We can live without money. We can't live without steak, you know? Look at this. This is a people that was given a vision of how to live a life of holiness by God, by God's self, by God himself. And instead of saying, you know, how lucky are we? Ashreinu matov chalkenu, right? What do they say? We want food. That's all that matters to us. And not just that we want, they're not complaining that they're hungry. They're not complaining that they're hungry. They're complaining they don't like the menu. They don't like, they're bored. There's no variety. You get it? That's the beginning of the book. Now, why is this here? Tell me why this is here. I'll tell you why this is here. Hold you, put a finger, don't put a finger here, but come back with me all the way back to Shemot. Can everybody come back with me to Shemot? Anybody mind? I promise you I'll get you to Shlach Lecha before we leave. Tomorrow. You're leaving tomorrow. Come back to right after the Red Sea. The Red Sea. Yera, Bo, where? Bishalach. Where's Bishalach? Bo, Bishalach. Yeah. Come here right after the Red Sea. Yeah, I'm gonna go right before the song. All right, so they crossed the Red Sea. They crossed the Red Sea. Look at page 405. Look at page 405.
What's the chapter and verse?
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Exodus 14:30. Yud Daled Pasuk Lamed, 14:30, okay? They were complaining before they crossed the Red Sea, remember? They said to Moses, you know, we're not enough graves in Egypt. You brought us out here to die in the wilderness. Because by the way, Jews, it doesn't matter that Pharaoh's army is rapidly approaching and death is on the way. Jews will always find a moment for a kvetch. And we become so beautifully articulate. There's this soliloquy about, you brought us out here to die. We told you this was the, right? And then Moses says, watch, and he holds his arm over the sea. You all know the story. You saw the movie if you didn't read the book. And the sea splits and we cross, and then Pharaoh chases, and the water comes back. And then the Torah says, right, the waters turned back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, Pharaoh's entire army that followed the sea. Not one of them remained, but the Israelites marched through the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on the left and the right. And then the story ends. Look, see the word thus? Thus is when a storyteller stops and says, let me tell you what I just told you, right? Thus, in this way, thus, the Lord delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Egypt saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea, and when Israel saw the wondrous power of the Lord had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and had faith in the Lord and his servant Moshe. What happened? They saw the miracle, and it changed them. This is a theory of human change. There's a theory of human change. That's the Big Bang theory of human change. All you need is a revolution, and people will be different. Power to the people, right? Everywhere, people are born free, Rousseau said, and everywhere they're in chains. Workers of the world unite, said Marx. This theory of human beings, that if you change the conditions of their existence, they will change internally, they will become free. Free of their prejudices, free of their biases, free of their evil. You will change the nature of human beings. The apocalyptic theory of human revolution. I was once young and had hair. And when I was young and had long hair, I believed in this, like so many of my generation. We believed that we could free ourselves from the power of the man and become free. Anybody remember hair? Give me a head with hair, long, beautiful. Remember that? Remember that show? Do you remember that? You remember that whole theory of revolution of the late 1960s? And it's a beautiful theory, and every young revolutionary in the world believes it. Every young revolutionary of the world believes it. Right? These days, people are out there, demonstrating. They think that if the Palestinians are given freedom, they will suddenly become gentle people. The only reason they're violent is because of, right? So that's the theory. That's an apocalyptic theory. It's a lovely theory if you're young. It's a great theory. The problem is you get older, and what do you discover? It don't work that way. And then what happens? You become disillusioned. The worst thing in the world is the disillusioned revolution, because they become very angry and very bitter. Sometimes they just retreat into their privatism, and sometimes they become very destructive, disillusioned. So there's a second voice in the Torah. Let me stop for a second. The Talmud is written in conversations, in arguments, dialogues. The Torah is written as a monologue, but it's not. There's a dialogue here. You just have to find the two voices. So the one voice is the apocalyptic voice that says, one big bang will change us all. I like to think of that as the young person's voice, young revolutionary's voice. And then there comes an older voice, an elder voice. And the elder voice says, I respect you. I respect your ideals. I respect your vision. I respect what you want in the world. I respect it. But you got to know something. It doesn't work that way. Human beings change, yes, but very, very slowly. It takes one step at a time. It is the ameliorist theory of revolution, or evolution, rather. It is an ameliorist theory which takes one step at a time. And what the older voice says is, I want to inoculate you against the disillusionment of what you're going to face when you begin your revolution. Because when you begin your revolution, you're going to discover that the human material out of which you intend to build your utopia is flawed. You will give them freedom and they will ask for hamburgers. You will give them liberty. You will give them idealism and they will ask for cucumbers and leeks and garlic. That's what they're going to ask for. You've got to know what you're dealing with. And that's why the book of Bamidbar is here. The book of Bamidbar is the other side of the conversation with the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. The book of Numbers and the book of Exodus are in conversation with each other. The book of Exodus says, we will free you from Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. And the book of Bamidbar says, yes, but it's going to take 40 years. It's going to take a lifetime of slow, slow change because it's easy to get people out of Egypt. It's a hell of a lot harder to get to Egypt out of the people. And that's what this book is about. And that's what this book is about. Now, you understand that. That was all by way of introduction. Now we'll begin the talk. You ready? That conversation you have to hear in the book. So come back to Shlach Lecha where we are today. We have what, 5 minutes left? What do we have? Quarter up. I was right. 5 minutes left. I'm terrific. This is great. So what happens? Look at what happens in Shlach Lecha. We're on page 840, chapter 13 in Numbers. Bamidbar Yud Gimel. Okay? Where are we? We're at the border. We made it. We got there. We're at the promised land. We're home. We got home. We're on the porch. Are you ready? We're on the porch, right? We're here. We're on the porch. And God says, send men to scout the land of Canaan. I'm giving Israelite people, one man each tribe. So Moshe picks out a bunch of bigwigs, right? And the list is here. They're all machers, right? Synagogue presidents, federation chairman, right? UJA captains, anti-defamation league, the bigwig, all of them. Every one of these guys is on a board, right? Okay. And what happens? They all go. He says, go to the land. And what happens? They all go to the land. You know the story, right? They all go to the land. They scout the land. And when they come back, what do they say? We're on page 843. Yud Gimel Kaf Hey. It's 1325. At the end of 40 days, they returned from scouting the land. They went straight to Moshe and Aaron and the whole Israelite community Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They made their report and they showed them the fruit of the land. And this is what they told him. We came to the land. It does indeed flow with milk and honey. This is the fruit. And then look at verse 28. You ready? However, I hate that. It's like, who was it that said everything before the however doesn't count? Right? Right? Ephes. The Hebrew word is ephes, which means zero. Right? However, the people who inhabit the country are powerful. The cities are fortified and very large. We saw the Anakites. Anak is a giant. We saw these mythical guys there. And the Anakites dwelled in the Negev, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, all kinds of ites, inhabit the hill country, the Canaanites by the sea. Caleb, who's the prince of the tribe of Judah, right? Hushed the people before Moshe and said, let's go up, we shall overcome, right? But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack the people that are stronger than we are. They spread calumnies, that's bad words, among the Israelites about the land. The country we traveled is one that devours its settlers. Eretz ochelet yashveha. We used to live in New York City in the old days. Was that lad, right? And all the people we saw are men of great size. We saw the mythical Nephilim, the Anakites Nephilim. And here's the line, ready? We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. Bugs. We felt like cockroaches, and we must have been there. And they project that into the other. Like it's just the psychology of projection, right? When a young kid hits around 11, 12, 13 years old, they become, we call self-conscious. Self-conscious isn't self-conscious. Self-conscious is now I can figure out how I must look in the eyes of that boy in my 7th grade English class. That's why 7th grade girls primp all the time. They're always primping because I don't want, and there's a zit at the end of my note. You remember what being in 7th grade was like, right? It's that, how do I look to the other? It's a projection. And the whole community broke in cries and they wept, and the Israelites rallied against Moshe. If only we had died in Egypt, there's the same fetch that they have, right? And Joshua, we'll go down a little bit, verse 6, Joshua tried to calm them and said, the land we traversed is exceedingly good. The Lord is pleased with us. He will bring us into the land. The land flows with milk and honey. He'll give it to us. Don't rebel. Have no fear. And here's the great line. He says, have no fear, right? Al tirmadu. Don't rebel against them. Against God, Vatem tiru et am haaretz. You'll see this land, right? Look at top of page 846, right? Lachmenu hem. They're toast, lechem, bread. They're toast. We'll eat them for breakfast. We have God. We just destroyed Pharaoh. He's the most powerful guy on the planet. You think these people bother us? Come on. But they don't want to hear it. They're afraid. They're afraid. So we have some time. We have 2 minutes. What happens when you're confronted with the thing you've been dreaming about your whole life, but you're afraid to take it? What happens when that moment of truth comes, when it's your moment, it's the moment you've been preparing for your whole life, but you're afraid to step up on that stage? You're afraid to sit at the piano. You're afraid to take the job. You're afraid to take the step. Right? How many times have I sat with a young groom who's afraid to walk down the aisle to the girl that he loves? I'll tell you how many times. You're facing that which you've wanted your whole life, and suddenly you feel unworthy. And you fear, and you so much fear. And what you do with that fear is you project it outward, right? How we look like to them, right? Such fear, such fear. This is a story about fear. Can a people who are slaves to their fears ever be a free people? Can a people who are slaves to their projections, slaves to this misperception, can they ever be a free people? Can they ever take what's theirs? Or do we project that that's so far away from me, I'll never have it? That's the problem. Now, there's one more piece of this. I'm going to just do this, and then I think we have to go in the shul. If you want to stay with me, it's fine with me. I've been skipping shul since I was 8 years old. I want you to look at the instruction again. Ready? I want you to look at this instruction. Go back to page 840 with me, okay? There's a clue here about what happened. about a mentality. Vayidaber Adonai Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe, and this is what he said. Shlach lecha anashim, send for yourself anashim. Well, first of all, by the way, if God destroyed Pharaoh, why does he have to send spies into the land? Like, that means you're going to have to fight for this land. It's not God who's going to fight for you. I mean, suddenly they're being asked to take responsibility for their own freedom. And that's what scares them. Shlach lecha, for yourself. And then look at the next word. Vayaturu. You can look at the translation, scout. Vayaturu, scout the land. Ready? Now look again at verse 17. Vayishlach otam Moshe. Moshe sent them out. Latur et haaretz. Latur et haaretz. To scout the land. Anybody know what the Hebrew word latur means? Well, let's stop for a second. Let's step back a second. When a person goes from one place to another, there's many different ways you can go. You can go to a place as a refugee, which means the place you're coming from is no longer habitable. You're looking for a place that's habitable. Okay? You can go as an immigrant. The place you're coming from is just fine, but the place you're going to is even better. Right? Okay? Some of you immigrated to Cleveland because it was better wherever you came from, right? You can go on a business trip. Anyone ever go someplace on a business trip? Right? What's interesting about a business trip? You don't want to interact with the place. See, the refugee wants to settle in the place because he can't stand the place he came from. The immigrant wants to settle in a place because it's a better place than the place I came from. Make aliyah to Israel. You want to go to Israel because you want to share its life. You want to integrate into the place as quickly as possible. You go on a business trip, you don't want to integrate. You don't want to integrate. You just want to go visit, get your business, come home. Right? So what you do is you go to that place and you don't let the place touch you. Right? You stay you go to Beijing and you stay at the Marriott. I had a neighbor, went to Beijing, so happy, got a big tour to China, and came back and said, do you know what we did? We ate at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Found Kentucky Fried Chicken in Beijing. You know what he said? Kentucky Fried. I said, you went, what, 20,000 miles to eat in Kentucky? You could have eaten in Kentucky Fried Chicken here. Where'd you stay? At the Marriott. It was just like home. You go on a business trip. Remember there was a book by Ann Taylor called The Accidental Tourist? Anybody remember that? It was about a guy who writes a book for business people visiting foreign lands so they don't have to change their lifestyle at all. They can have American breakfasts, live in American hotels, drive American cars, eat American dinners, and get home without being touched by the place. And you realize that the guy who's writing the book, that's the way he lived his life. He never let life touch him. Another way to go to a place is as a tourist. A tourist. Now, a tourist has a choice. There are tourists who go to places and they really want to let the place touch them. But a lot of people don't. I remember living in Israel. You guys remember this too. You live in Israel, right? And I became native. I started dressing like an Israeli. I had little shorts and sandals and a t-shirt and my idiot hat, over Tembel, literally idiot hat. That's what it means. And I spoke bad Hebrew, but it didn't matter. I looked like an Israeli. And these tour buses would pull up with American tourists, right? And this ginormous air-conditioned tour bus. It's air conditioned, so you don't even have to breathe the air of the land you're in, right? With these giant, thick, smoked windows, so you don't have to touch the land. And you get off, and if you do get off the bus, what do you do to protect yourself? You have your own environmental thing. It's a giant camera right here that says, back off, I don't belong here, right? And you come in like, I want to experience the place. I want to sightsee, right? I want to sights. I don't want the place I don't want it to touch me. I'm afraid of what's out there. So I'll go to Beijing and eat in Kentucky Fried Chicken. I know. Or I go to Paris and eat at Taco Bell, right? What did Moshe tell them to do? Latur et haaretz. What does the word latur mean? To be a tourist. He didn't tell them this is our new home. Go make a home here. He told them, go tour the land. So they did. And what did they see? Scary things like every tourist does, things I don't want to enjoy. Anyone happen to know what the symbol of the Israeli Ministry of Tourism is?
Great.
It's this story. The two spies come back with a bunch of grapes the size of basketballs. And they say, look how beautiful the land is, but we'll never have it. That's the symbol of the Israeli Ministry of Tourism. Now, here's the last thing. It's too bad people are leaving because they're going to miss the punchline. Look at the very last line of the Torah portion. Look at the last line of the Torah portion. Real quick. I know you got to go. I promise you'll get all the sukkah de zimra you can eat. Come on. Go on. Page 854, chapter 15, verse 37. You know this. Vayidber Adonai Moshe lemor. Deber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem v'asu lehem tzitzit. Here's what I want you to do. Wear tzitzis. Wear a talis. Why? Wear a fringe on your garment. Why? Al kanfeh, right? Vayalachem l'tzitzit uri'item oto uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai. You will remember all of God's mitzvahs and who you are. Right? Vilo what? Read it. Below taturu, acharei levavchem ve'acharei enechem. Wear this garment, says God, and don't be a tourist in my world. This world belongs to you. This world is your home. You are responsible for it. Don't be a tourist. Be an immigrant. Go on aliyah. Be here. Live here. Engage this place. Smell it, touch it, taste it, breathe it, make it part of you. Don't be tourists. That's what this Torah portion is about. People who are so filled with fear that they're unwilling to touch the land of their promises. Instead, God says, I will give you the courage to go into that land and to live in that land, to go into the world and live in that world. That's what this whole tradition is here to do. Have a very good Shabbos. We'll see you inside. Push.